You're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous probably 10 days. Today we have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. This is not something like a major update about the situation between the 29th of July and 10th of August of 2026 because it is impossible to cover everything. We will discuss just the most important things and we will continue discussing the most important things during the next several days while making videos. So during this period of time, the Russians, as you know, managed to improve their position significantly, especially along the northern front line. Furthermore, we had reports about missile and drone attacks deep inside of the territory of Russia, as well as massive attacks through the inside territory of Ukraine between Odessa, Kiev, and the western parts of Ukraine. And the most important thing, Zelensky's idea was rejected regarding the license on Patriot missiles, but from the other side, we received the report that the United States of America decided to provide Ukrainians with ATACMS missiles. Ukraine purchased American weapons from Turkey. Ukraine has acquired 70 ATACMS missiles, 12 M270 launchers, and tens of thousands of cluster munitions from Turkey. This is according to a report from the U.S. Department of State. The announcement was made as a part of a legally managed procedure for approving the re-export of American weaponry. The complete list is as follows: 12 M270 launchers, 70 ATACMS ballistic missiles, 2,524 projectiles with cluster warheads, and 47,000 cluster artillery shells. And telling the truth, during the previous few hours, I was trying to find the video published by Ukrainian side or by Russian side when the Ukrainians were using cluster rounds to attack Russian forces. As you may know, several years ago, during the special military operation, the United States of America already provided Ukrainians with weapons, with cluster rounds, and the Ukrainians were using them when the Russians were attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine around the city of Donetsk during the Pokrovsk offensive operation, but not the Pokrovsk offensive operation that took place in 2025, but we're talking about the Pokrovsk offensive operation during 2024 when the Russians were moving along the railways between Avdiivka and Cherezin. So right after the end of the battle for Avdiivka, the Ukrainians were using cluster rounds provided by the United States of America, and this process and this situation took place in 2023 and 2024. But after the end of the battle for the southern Pokrovsk bridgehead, the Ukrainians stopped using cluster rounds, probably due to the fact that the United States of America stopped supplying Ukrainians with this type of weapon. And probably during the previous 2 years, we haven't received even a single video where the Ukrainians were using cluster rounds to attack Russian forces. But now everything changes. Now everything has been changed once again. The United States of America decided to provide Ukrainians with this type of weapon instead of providing the Ukrainians with Patriot missiles and license for Patriot missiles. So which means that the Russians, most likely the intelligence of the United States of America, considers that the Russians are about to begin their major offensive operation with the purpose to break through Ukraine's defenses. Most likely the Russians managed to concentrate lots of forces, and the only possible way how to stop these forces is to use weapons like cluster weapons. And telling the truth, these days we start receiving lots of updates from the Orekhov direction on this matter. For example, today several sources reported that the new commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces appears to have transferred significant reserves to the Zaporozhye region over the past week. The new commander-in-chief is now trying to operate in a new way and is developing his own strategies. So we are waiting for news from Zaporozhye. And during the previous 10 days, between the 29th and the 10th of August, 29th of July and 10th of August, we received lots of updates from this direction. And the most important update is that the Russians have improved their positions significantly through the city of Orekhov, and we start receiving first updates from the most southern parts and the southeastern parts of the city. And these are the changes between the 29th of July and the 10th of August of 2026. And as you can see, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. The Russians managed to dig in deeper, and currently the Russians control up to 30% of the Orekhov agglomeration, and the Ukrainians control less than 50%. So this is the situation. But before we start with changes on the ground, first let's continue with ATACMS, Patriot systems, and so on. During the previous days, we received lots of updates on the matter of work of Ukraine air defense forces. And according to information we have, for example, between the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to launch 130 air means to attack the territory of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians managed to destroy just 96 drones. But the most important thing that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians didn't use Iskander missiles, but according to information we have, the Ukrainians haven't managed to bring down even a single missile launched by Russians, probably since the beginning or since the end of July of 2026. And when talking about August, the sources reported that just 29 missiles were intercepted. Russia fired 195 ballistic missiles at Ukraine in July, and the Russian armed forces launched 195 ballistic missiles at Ukraine in July, with only 29 intercepted, according to monitoring channels. And there were lots of strikes during this period of time. The Russians were attacking Kiev, the Russians were attacking the western parts of Ukraine, but probably one of the most interesting attacks took place in the Odessa region. This attack took place not between the 9th and 10th of August. This attack took place between 8th and 9th of August of 2026, and according to information we have, the Russians used lots of drones and missiles. According to available information, the Russians directed approximately 90 strikes and reconnaissance drones of types Gerani and different others, 11 ballistic missiles of the Onyx type, Iskander M, Banderol type, and many other types of weapons. The Russians were attacking the city of Odessa, and as you see, the Russians attacked the city of Odessa and the Odessa port infrastructure almost at the same time when we received the report that Ukraine purchased American weapons from Turkey. And the Odessa port infrastructure, the state of Romania, and the Romanian port infrastructure are the only way, probably the only shortest way how the Ukrainians can get these weapons from Turkey. We're talking about ATACMS missiles and cluster rounds. So we believe that during the previous 24 hours, during the previous 48 hours, the Russians were attacking not just objects of logistics and objects of energy and infrastructure, as you can see right now in front of your screens. We believe that the Russians attacked warehouses, ammo depots, and everything related to this deal between Ukraine and the United States of America on the matter of cluster rounds and ATACMS missiles. So lots of objects were attacked and destroyed, and probably the Russians, as a result of reconnaissance operation, managed to discover the situation. The question I have is that why it seems that the United States of America provided Ukrainians with these missiles. Most likely Ukraine received this missile through the state of Odessa. The question is why the United States of America provided or revealed this information about these missiles, so the Russians were able to use this information for analysis and then for attacks on the territory of Ukraine. So most likely a batch of these missiles, ATACMS missiles and cluster munitions, were hit and destroyed by the Russians during that overnight attack. Once again, this is the map that was published by different sources, pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how exactly the Russians were attacking the Odessa region. And another important situation is that the Russians, during the same period of time, also attacked the Zatoka bridge. not just the Zatoka Bridge, but the Zatoka Bridge and the Mayaki Bridge. So, as you may know, the only way how the Ukrainians can receive weapons through the Odessa region is, of course, through the port infrastructure of the Odessa region, and then through two bridges. No, not two bridges, but through two areas. The first area is the area of the city of Zatoka, this territory, but according to information we have, between the 29th of July and the 10th of August of 2026, the Russians attacked this territory with drones and with missiles, and we have a lots of videos on this matter. For example, in this video we can see how exactly the Russians were attacking the Zatoka region, the Zatoka bridge, and the sources reported that as a result of attack, the Zatoka bridge was badly damaged, and most likely the Ukrainians lost possibilities to use this bridge for logistic purposes. And during the previous nights, the Russians attacked the Mayaki bridge, and as a result of attack, the bridge was also badly damaged by Russians. And not today, but yesterday, the bridge was attacked, and we have a video on this matter. In this video, we can see how people were trying to cross the Mayaki bridge that basically connects the mainland of Ukraine with the southwestern parts of Ukraine, that the Ukrainians use for logistic purposes, especially for this deal between states and Ukraine on the matter of cluster rounds and cluster munition. We have a lots of videos where we can see traffic, where we can see problems, and so on. This is a very important situation. As you can see, first, most likely the Russians knew that the Ukrainians were planning to receive these weapons, so that is why they were attacking these two bridges with the purpose to slow down the Ukrainians and not to allow them to get these weapons fast, flexible, and so on. And when the Russians destroyed or badly damaged the logistics, the Russians, as a result of the next stage of the next phase of attack, continued attacking all warehouses and infrastructure that may be related to these deal with ATACMS missiles and the cluster rounds. So that was a very interesting attack carried out by Russians. As of the beginning of the 10th of August of 2026, the Russians haven't reported anything on the matter of results of this attack, whether the Russians managed to break the deal, or maybe the Russians just destroyed several warehouses. So as of now, we need more information on this matter. So this is the most important situation. Once again, summarizing everything, the United States of America believes that the Patriot missiles won't change the situation in Ukraine. License for Patriot missiles won't change the situation in Ukraine as well, because this technology could be stolen by somebody, by a third party, or could be provided to some other party. So that is why the United States of America believes that the only way how to stop the Russians is to provide these weapons, most likely before the beginning of the major offensive operation that might take place in the Zaporozhye region, where the Russians are just several dozens kilometers from the city of Zaporozhye itself. So now let's return back to the Zaporozhye direction. Once again, the Russians, as a result of clashes, improved their position significantly through the southeastern parts of the settlement, and the Russians continue advancing. Furthermore, we see a pocket that was created by the Russians around the settlement of Mala Takmachka, and most likely currently the Ukrainians who were caught into these pockets have no chances for, let's say, escaping or leaving this pocket, probably through the river of Konska, but the Russians most likely have complete FPV drone control over the territory, so which means that in coming several days the Russians will continue tightening the noose around the settlement, around the settlement of Mala Takmachka, with the purpose to finish the battle for this territory as soon as possible. This will allow the Russians to create a stable foothold through the southeastern parts of the Orekhov agglomeration, and this will allow the Russians to finish the battle for this territory. And with the fall of the Orekhov agglomeration, agglomeration, the battle for the Yurkov-Katavrisk agglomeration begins. And if this battle ends, then the battle for Zaporozhye begins, because from these positions there are no more big settlements or towns or villages in front of the city itself. Furthermore, the Russians managed to improve their positions also significantly through the northern flank of the Orekhovsk agglomeration, and we are talking about the settlement by the name of Lubitska, so which located along 0408 roads between the mainland and the city of Orekhov itself. And as you can see, the Russians, as a result of clashes, cut this road physically. This information was provided by the group of forces east, and as you can see, now the Ukrainians of the Orekhov agglomeration have less possibilities to support their contingent through this territory. So the major battle for the Zaporozhye direction begins, and the Russians, as you understand, are tasked to get as close as possible to the city itself with the purpose to have complete artillery control, the most important thing, over bridges and lines between the western and the eastern banks of the river of Dnipro. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pavlograd or Dnipro direction. During the previous 10 days, the map has been adjusted, as you can see, significantly through this pocket. As we see, the Ukrainians continue their counter-offensive operation in this area, trying to improve their positions between rivers of Volcha and Mokry Yali, and according to different sources, the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours have improved their positions significantly. So we have added additional gray zone or contested area, because even according to pro-Russian sources, the villages like Zeleny Gai, Ivanovka, and many other different towns and villages through this territory were recaptured by the Ukrainians, and we see that the Russians as of now are not able to do anything with this, or the Russians are trying to create the situation when the Ukrainians will concentrate a lot of forces in this pocket, and then the Russians will strike back with the purpose to recapture lost territories. Now let's talk about the Dobropolye direction. During this period of time, the Russians also improved their position significantly. Since the 29th of July of 2026, the Russians have taken the villages of Svetle and Chernigovka. These are the territories to the south of the settlement of Dobropolye. As of now, the most important question is about the mine of Belitska. During the previous days, several sources reported that the mine of Belitska was also captured by Russians, but during the same period of time we received the video where we can see how Russians were attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine through this territory, which means that most likely this mine is still under complete control of the armed forces of Ukraine. Anyway, the Russians managed to break through Ukraine's defenses, and according to different pro-Ukrainian sources, the Ukrainians also have concentrated significant number of forces through this territory with the purpose to slow down the Russians and not to allow them to take the city of Dobropolye under complete control. So now we see that there is a significant concentration of forces in the Zaporozhye direction and in the Dobropolye direction. Now let's talk about the city of Drushkovka and the city of Slaviansk. During the previous 10 days, the Russians have also improved their positions significantly through this area. According to information we have, the Russians during the previous days have captured the settlements of Krasny Kut and Taretska, so which means that the Russians are about to finish the battle for the southwestern flank of the settlement of Drushkovka. There are just several villages left before the Russians approach the city. We're talking about the settlement of Novogrigorovka, Petrivka, Raiska, and Raiska. And if Russians enter any of this village, this means that the Russians enter the Drushkovka agglomeration from the southwest. The Russians are pushing. And as you can see, according to this concentration of forces, there are also lots of units. Lots of units were recorded, and we see that a new commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Drapati, believes that the Drushkovka agglomeration remains one of the most important directions for Russians, because the Russians approach the settlement of Trushkovka from the southwest, as you can see, and we start receiving during the same period of time, during the same 10 days, significant number of updates from the area of Alexeyevo Drushkovka and the settlement of Stenki. The Russians improved their positions through this area. During this period of time, the Russians improved their positions through the village of Stenki, and it seems that the Russians managed to finish encirclement of the Ukrainians left in the area of the settlements of Chervone and Podolska. We're not talking about thousands of Ukrainians, we're talking about several hundreds, but we believe that during the next several days the Russians will finish the battle for this pocket as well. This will allow the Russians to maintain the lines, first of all to shorten the lines, and from these positions to continue advancing further along railways in the direction of the settlement of Kramatorsk. Furthermore, we start receiving reports that the Russians also entered the settlement of Izhevka, and maybe in coming days we will start receiving significant changes. As for the settlement of Alexeyevo Drushkovka and Osikova, during the previous 24 hours, several pro-Russian sources reported that the Russians entered this Alexeyevo Drushkovka agglomeration and digging deeper. So the city of Konstantinovka is far behind the Russian backs. The Russians continue advancing and continue approaching the settlement of Drushkovka both from the southwest and from the southeast. Now let's talk about the Liman direction and about the Slavinsk direction. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours, as for the previous 10 days, the map hasn't been adjusted almost completely. We have small changes around the settlement of Alexandrovka, and we have a video confirming Russian control over the western parts of the settlement. In this video, we can see Russian troops securing trenches in the southwestern parts of the settlement, which means that indeed the Russians have strong control over the settlement, and the Russians continue advancing further towards the Nikolaevka stronghold. And I expected that during the previous 10 days the Russians would confirm control over the city of Liman, but as you can see, we haven't received anything, which means that the battle for Liman continues. But another important video was published from this area, and we are talking about the territory to the north of the city of Liman, about the forest, this one to the northwest of the settlement of Zelene Dolina. This video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and in this video we can see how Ukrainians were attacking this forest. You know that during the previous days we received lots of reports that Ukrainians began a counter-offensive operation in this area and that they managed to improve their position significantly. The Ukrainians with this counter-offensive operation are trying to slow down the Russians through the city of Liman, but this video first of all reveals positions of Russians, edge positions of Russians, and that probably this is something like a current line of combat contact, which means that most likely the Russians managed to repel Ukraine's attack, and now the Russians control this line, which means that now the Russians are repelling Ukraine's attack in this area with the purpose to stabilize the situation and to finish the battle for the city of Liman itself. As for the northern directions, we will cover them during the next update, during the evening update. We have lots of changes. We will talk about the northern direction in details, and during the next update we will discuss more attacks, more strikes, the situation with Ukraine's attacks deep inside of the territory of Russia, and we are going to talk about many more things about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. Thank you for waiting for me. The